Hello, beloved survivors. This is Autumn. In today's episode, we're discussing a writing workshop that Adrian and I facilitate in Ireland each summer. It's called Writing the Next World. And one of those workshops is coming up this year, July 5th through 10th, 2026. And it's going to be taking place in Ireland in West Cork. And applications are due March 27th. Just in a couple of weeks here. So take a listen to this episode, and if you're interested in applying to be a part of the workshop, follow the link in the show notes to learn more. Okay, enjoy the show. I'm Autumn Brown, frontwoman of the soul pop band Autumn, a queer science fiction writer, a theologian, a mother of dragons, and a healing justice facilitator for social movements living on Dakota and Anishinaabe land, currently known as Minneapolis.
And I'm Adrian Marie Brown, Autumn's older sister. I taught her everything she knows. I'm a luscious Black queer witch writer auntie. I'm an apocalyptic love scholar. I'm a gardener of healing ideas, and I just had surgery. So I'm going to just be here doing my very best because we really want to have this conversation today. I live in the land of the Occaneechi, Shakori, Skurure, Tuscarora, Eno, and Lumbee peoples, currently known as Durham.
You're doing great. And this is How to Survive the End of the World.
Our podcast about learning from apocalypse with grace, rigor, and curiosity.
Our podcast that becomes more relevant every day that passes.
It's so relevant now. I feel like we've never done it.
As a reminder, we have no ads. We are listener supported.
But you can join our Patreon for exclusive content. I'm really excited about what we're about to do, sister.
We are so excited. We're so excited for today's conversation. So today we are welcoming to the show both ourselves and our guests, because all together, together we're a band. Together we're basically a coven, we decided. But also together we are the masterminds behind the Writing the Next World workshop that takes place in Ireland each summer. This is our fourth year. This year that we're doing it is our fourth year.
Yeah.
And we're
in our fifth year going.
And so we're excited to bring onto the show three of our favorite people on earth, Kate McCabe, Max Sussman, and Dwight Dunstan, who are all a part of the magic that is the Writing the Next World workshop.
And some of them are married.
So
cool.
I'm just gonna kick us off with a little introduction of our guests, because they are very distinguished individuals. And then as a collective, we are also distinguished. So we're going to start with a little intro, and then we're going to head into our check-in as usual. And you got to hear everybody's voices, and then you'll get to hear more about our process together. So Kate McCabe has spent the last 20 years immersed in food, Irish politics, and the environment. Both sides of Kate's family hail from Ireland, from Tullamore and Belfast, and she has traveled extensively throughout the country. Kate is the guiding force behind Bog and Thunder's commitment to sustainability as a travel company, and has multiple degrees in environmental policy, including a master's in environmental justice from the University of Michigan. Kate and her partner Max co-host the podcast Dyed Green. Kate is also a writer working on her first book, and she is the founder of a creative arts and peace-building organization called Aisht. Welcome, Kate.
Welcome, Kate.
Thanks.
Max Sussman is an award-winning chef and restaurateur who has published 4 cookbooks. Count them, 4 cookbooks.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Max grew up cooking organic food at a summer camp in Western Michigan, nerd, before moving on to work at the beloved Zingerman's Deli, and later as the chef de cuisine at Eve in Ann Arbor. After moving to New York, Max worked at the Michelin-starred The Breslin before moving to Roberta's. Max was also chef de cuisine at the renowned pizzeria when it received 2 stars from the New York Times. While there, he also secured a James Beard nomination and a Forbes 30 Under 30 award. In 2015, Max and his brother Eli founded Samesa, a Middle Eastern-inspired fast casual restaurant and catering company in Midtown Manhattan. Max is also the chef behind Pizza Replicator and Bev's Bagels, pop-ups run out of a micro bakery in the family home. Although I believe Bev's is now its own storefront.
It's brick and mortar. We got to update.
Brick and mortar.
Got to update the bio.
Update the bio.
Can you update the bio for next time, Max?
So Kate and Max are the married couple, and they're adorable. And they together created Bog and Thunder, which you'll hear more about later in the show. And that brings us to our last distinguished guest, Dwight Dunstan, a.k.a. Duns. Duns is a facilitator, artist, and innovator who has spent the last decade studying and experimenting with ideas and frameworks to unlock potential in individuals, groups, and organizations. As a trained facilitator, we love facilitators, a grief ritualist, and a clown. A clown. Duns brings an unorthodox approach to conversations around conflict, strategic planning and visioning, and organizational development, and I would say an unorthodox approach to most things in life. Duns is also one of my closest music collaborators and one of the most beloved people in my life. He is a part of Autumn the Band. Listeners will recognize him from one of our previous episodes because he was the beat producer for both of our EPs. And Dwight has participated in Writing the Next World for the last 2 years, his first year as a participant writer, a student. And then in his second year, he returned as a sort of artist in residence, which is part of what we're going to talk about today. Dwight, welcome back to the podcast.
Yeah, we are so glad to have all of y'all here with us. And it really does feel like a reunion because we're really every time the 5 of us are together now, it's a magic moment, a magic creating moment where the unexpected can happen.
It's a cauldron.
A cauldron too, as well. We cast spells together. We really do cast spells together. But before we hop into straight up interview, we always like to start off with just finding out how everyone's doing right now on the clock of the world. There's a lot happening as we're coming into this call. I think this is our first time recording since some of the latest rounds of bombing and attacks have been happening around the world. And it's really hard to be an American in these streets right now and feel that duality of not wanting any of this to happen and being in the place that is causing so much of it. And I know that y'all, Max and Kate, are in Michigan where there was just an attack. Someone, I think, drove a car into Temple, Israel, which sounds like it was connected to or reacting to bombing in Lebanon. And it's just this nothing is far from any of us right now. Everyone is coming in really close. So wanted to take a moment, ground ourselves in just how are we doing coming into the call today. And Autumn, why don't you start us off and then we'll ask our guest.
Wow. It's Friday the 13th.
Oh.
And a very, I think, auspicious day to be recording. Cauldron-y kind of day. I'm coming to the end of what has truly been a very exhausting but very transformative week of my life. There's been a lot of healing in this week of my life and a lot of change. And so I'm having physically, I've got the eye twitch that happens when I'm too tired. But I also feel very alive and grateful. Lots of things happening on the family front, a lot of things happening for my kids that I'm just trying to be really present for.
Yeah.
And, lots of just like precipice feelings.
It feels like your kids tend to go in growth spurts at the same time in three different directions.
Together.
Every time. Yeah.
Together. And then I find myself like getting to the end of my day thinking, wow, was that all today? So it's been a lot this week, but I'm really grateful to be here with you all. It's like so good just to see everyone's faces.
I'm glad you're here, sister. Dwight, Duns, how you doing?
I am feeling grateful and excited to be in the reunion space with everybody and just see y'all's faces on the screen. Yeah, and also appreciate Adrian, you just grounding us in the times. Yeah, have been feeling tender about the world and tender about and grief in different parts of my personal life too, and just it all. I've been saying a lot that I feel like very alive. I feel very alive and sort of in all of the feelings, not shying away from any feelings of just being in life, so the joys, the gratitudes, the elation, the absurdity, and also the hard things, the grief, the brokenheartedness, uncertainty. So
we welcome all of that.
That's how I am today.
Kate, how are you doing?
I am doing pretty well. I am also grateful, especially for my family. I think there is a lot going on in the world, and it feels like these past few weeks, even the most major headlines are like, even if we're not maybe directly impacted by some of the violence that's happening in the world, there are other direct connections or things that we're dealing with in different ways. And I mentioned my family because I think that having children kind of makes you, on the one hand, feel a little bit more terrified about what's going on in the world, but also helps ground you. And for me, it helps me deal with the day-to-day because I need to provide an environment of comfort, even amidst all of the things that are happening in the world. I don't want my children to grow up scared and terrified, and I want them to be able to experience joy and be open-minded. There's so much that I could say, but just calling back to what Adrian said in the beginning of the conversation here, the check-in. There was an attacker and a shooting at a synagogue in West Bloomfield yesterday, which is very close to where Max's family lives. Max's family is Jewish, and I know that they felt that very intensely. I'm sure they have close friends that belong to that synagogue. So that's definitely very scary. But I also want to mention, we learned this morning that the shooter was Lebanese and that he had lost family recently in the attacks in Trump's war. And he also happened to be an employee at one of our favorite Lebanese restaurants in Dearborn. So there's a food connection there, and it also feels, I don't know anything else about him personally, but it feels like, it's an example of just how complicated everything is that's happening right now, and just, the ways these things that happen far away impact people in all different kinds of ways.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Kate. Thanks for shining a bit more light on what you know there. Max, how are you doing?
I am feeling grateful for the opportunity to reflect on how I'm doing, which I don't really do that very often. But lately I've been, I think, trying to come to terms with the fact that there's so much happening so fast that I can't really keep track of all of it. And that's kind of a new feeling for me. And just coming to terms with that, moving from feeling, like overwhelmed to reconciled in some way. And also, maybe having a little bit more long-term perspective on how change happens and my role, and, just thinking about what it is that I'm supposed to be doing right now. And I'm also personally on that sort of a line between where you're tired, so tired that you're anxious, but then you're kind of just getting into the silly zone too. So
Yeah.
yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Can I add something really quick that I thought of that was really helpful to me this past week?
Yes.
I listened to one of your recent episodes, the one, Adrian, where you spoke with Sonia Renee Taylor, and you were talking a little bit about the news cycle and about constantly needing to feel like you need to know everything that's going on and be as informed as possible. And, you know, one of you said something about how you recognize that that is also like a form of control, or the way that we sort of feel like the more informed we are, the better we'll be able to manage what's happening, even though we literally can't. I listened to that, and as a result, I stopped looking at threads all the time and stopped trying to, which was causing me a lot of anxiety. So I wanted to say thank you for that. You know, it's not that I didn't sort of already know, but I wasn't really thinking about it like that. And I think that also helps me. I think I have a way of being informed about what's happening in the world that doesn't need to be like filtered through these talking heads on the internet. And I think that is a really great way of, you know, moving through life and not having that noise. And as a result, I have like very few reasons to even look at my phone, which I would say is an overall positive thing.
Thank you for weaving that in, Kate. That was Sonia's wisdom. And I've listened to the episode like 4 times since we put it out, because what came through her feels so grounding for me.
Adrian, how are you, sister? How are you, surgery sis?
So folks who've been listening this year, I think you know, I lost a tooth, my front tooth, last year. I was actually like, the moment before I had to give up the tooth it was like something was going on with the tooth, and then a baby friend of mine jumped up into my face in a moment of delight and really just knocked it all the way off kilter. But then I had to travel. So last year when we were all in Ireland together, I was there the whole time with this like loose tooth that was like on the verge of falling out and quite miserable and all the things. So I came home, had it removed. I had no idea the process was going to be this long. So the tooth came out in September, and it's just been going through all these different like surgical levels of extraction and healing and rescheduling and growing bone and all this. Anyway, yesterday I had the implant part where they basically put what looks like a straight up screw directly into my skull, I guess, to then become the thing that will hold a crown in my tooth. But now I've got to wait another 3 months for this process. And I keep trying to tell people, like, it's one of these things where you're like, everything is so fucked in the world right now that I don't want to complain. But the pain that I'm in is so intense and varying that I can't help, you know, like I'm just like, you just have to know that almost any time I've been talking for the past year has been like not fun. And this past day was really, I was just sort of like, God, I'm really over this, you know, but it does feel like also my talisman of misery. Like it feels like a meditative practice at this point to just be with, like, this world has misery. It has misery every day, even when there's joy, even when things are going well, there's suffering happening somewhere. And oh God, what a blessing it would be if the percentages were like this, where it was just like one tooth-sized suffering in the whole world and the rest was joy, which is what I can honestly say about so much of my life. Like the suffering in my life comes from what my nation is doing and what powerful pedophilic people do, but it's not in my own choices, in my own life, in my own relationships. And this week has felt like a real clarifying for me that, yeah, I think I feel the world so personally and so deeply. And it has been like so important to be like, oh yeah, it's just, that's the suffering part. And you're doing everything you can to stop suffering. And then you spend the rest of your life increasing joy and increasing truth and increasing capacity. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. I'm on painkillers, and so it'll be a little soft
Great.
and loose probably with this
Great.
brain today, but I think, Autumn, you're going to hold us through the fire anyway. We're both exhausted. We're both barely hanging on. You know,
this is real life.
This is also
real
important to you,
life.
though, I think.
Right
this
now.
is what real life is like right now. I don't trust anyone who's like, everything's great.
No.
You know, I'm like, no. Tell me how the suffering is touching you. And then I can trust you and we can talk about some other things. But first, I have to know you're awake to the suffering. I think that there's a reason Buddhism put that first, right?
All right.
Anyway, so hi.
Landed it.
I landed it like a plane, baby. Now, I'm excited. Autumn, I think first we should tell people a little bit about what Writing the Next World is and, how Writing the Next World came to be. Do you want to start off there a little bit? And then I can talk a little bit about the Ireland of it all for us.
Yeah. There's kind of a beautiful origin story and a connection between the story that we're sharing here and for longtime listeners, you may remember some episodes a few years ago that came out in 2019, which was the very first time that Kate ever brought us to Ireland.
Yeah.
And we went to Northern Ireland with her and and Max as well. And I always tell people it was like the political education of a lifetime.
Yes.
It was like one of the most important trips I've ever taken in my life. And it was the first time that we led writing workshops focused on visionary fiction in Ireland. And the audience of those workshops were Irish folks in Northern Ireland. And then after
many of whom are still friends.
Folks, yes. And we met so many amazing people, including the great poet, playwright, and political activist, Lawrence McKeon, who is still very much a part of the world that we are like continuing to build with our alums and Writing the Next World. But so for listeners who want a little bit of that context, if you go back a few seasons and you find the episode that we recorded featuring Lawrence McKeon, that kind of helps set the context for where this all comes from. A few years after that first workshop, Kate and Max created this amazing travel company, Bog and Thunder, where they create these food and travel experiences specifically in Ireland for people. And they had this vision of figuring out a way for us to bring back the visionary fiction writing workshop, but kind of open it up so that lots of different people from other parts of the world could come in and participate in a writing retreat experience that also had a food component and also had a component that was about being able to root in place. And so that's how Writing the Next World was born.
Yeah. And there's a piece of it, and Kate, maybe you can speak more to this, but the COVID of it all, that it was like COVID had happened and Ireland is a place that really their economy really relies on tourism, on people coming and being a part of it. And so even though it's our small offer, it felt like something that we could do to bring attention and bring people and money and resources in to these communities that were trying to recover from what happened, all around the world with COVID, which is like the economies got so slowed down, stopped, and so the food part of it is actually so delicious and wonderful for us, but it also is like this deep way of weaving with each local community we're in, because all the food is sourced locally and we know where it's coming from. There's a local chef, beloved friend of ours, Rose, who has come a few times and really like makes a poem out of every single meal, alongside Max and with our, what's the little baby's name? Baby Kate, and also Baby Kate, who comes and helps us out each time. And but Kate, is there anything you want to add just to those from your side of that origin story?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it is important to note that before we started Bog and Thunder, before I reached out to you about the workshops, I was originally inspired by Octavia's Brood.
Yes.
And I was really moved by the book and by the way that you and Walida brought all of those different activists together. And so I was inspired. It made me wonder what visionary workshops like that would look like if they were done with communities of people who had experienced political violence. from, however they defined that experience. So that was kind of the jumping off point for doing the workshops in the North. So what does it look like, for people who experience war to envision a future like 20 years after the Good Friday Agreement, and to kind of collectively envision 20 years into the future. And so that experience I knew it was going to be amazing, and it was so much better than I could possibly have imagined. And I think we all just really, fell in love with each other and the work, when we were over there. And we knew that we had to come back. And, the version of it that we do now is still grounded in Black Feminist Praxis, but we do the collective writing workshops, but really people can bring to it whatever it is that they're working on. And every year I'm really, just fascinated by the different ways that people are weaving speculative fiction and fantasy and all these other genres into the work that they're doing.
Max, anything you want to say?
Well, the first year I almost didn't come.
Bad form.
Yeah, I know. Wow. But I'm so glad I did. But, it kind of was the seed for my involvement, in the following years, as far as, driving a van and cooking the food. But I am very grateful to be in that role, because I feel like when people gather to do this kind of work, like, it's very important that they are nourished, because they're going into a place that's kind of tender and vulnerable. And like, having great food is such a important and core part of feeling safe and secure. And so it's like what I love doing, but it also fits with this really well. And so, I'm glad I boiled those eggs all the way back in 2019. I
still think of those eggs.
It'll have to be like a recipe in the liner notes for the show.
I know there's something. Who knew that timing can be a part of a recipe?
Yeah.
I want to say a word on Ireland, if I can, because I think, when I think back to the first invitation, I was like, oh yeah, Ireland, that could be cool. It wasn't on my radar as as a place that could be a teacher. I think of Ireland now as a place that is a teacher. It's a place where the people have held on to just enough of the magic and the mystery that anyone who lands there, you could come across a fairy. You could come across people who believe in fairies. You could come across a river that is a woman. You could come across a mound in a hill that is an ancestral burial ground that is also a vagina. You could come across so many things that will really surprise you. But I think that
so many vaginas,
and I have to call in Mankan, who's one of our dear teachers and friends who we lost this past year, who was with us in the first year that we offered the training, and taught us so much about the language of love, the language of Ireland, the stories, the mysteries of this place. And then Lawrence, I think so much of the political education we got, which has been so important, is what does it look like to be a part of resistance to a power that feels total or overwhelming or all encompassing, or in some way bigger? What does it feel like to be a part of resistance to that? What does it feel like to come to the other side of a thing? So Lawrence was a hunger striker alongside Bobby Sands, and technically died and was brought back to life in the process of his hunger striking. And I think before that, I had interacted with a lot of different revolutionaries, a lot of people who had been a part of history. And there's this feeling that they have, which is like life goes on and you have to keep creating. You have to keep stoking that fire inside of yourself. Even if you're not the frontline resistance in that moment, there's something in you that has to be a fire that you keep going. And every time we go to Ireland, I feel like it's part of stoking that revolutionary fire for me now, because I think for anyone who lives in the US now, we maybe have some clue of how much of a veil is over us, how deeply we are inside of a matrix that keeps us from really knowing what's going on. And sometimes you can travel without ever leaving that matrix. That's how capitalism works, especially American Western imperialist capitalism. But in Ireland, you can't really go and keep your veil on, you know? Every time we go, like, even if you just go out to the pub to grab a pint, like, someone is going to be like, so you're from America. So let me tell you something about your fucking up stupid president or what, you know, like, they'll just like pierce through. I mean, like, and that's with love, right? They're like, I love you and I can't wait to tell you the truth and let's talk about it. And like the idea that's like just the limo driver, you know, for the bus driver, the taxi rider, the waitress, like everyone is awakened to what's going on around them. And it's not like everyone necessarily agrees, but there's such a larger sense of collectively held humanity, and that there's a dignity in being people who stand up for others. And there's a massive relationship between Ireland and Palestine. And I want to say, like, there's the continuing to go back to Ireland. At first, I thought it was like something we were giving, but now it really has become something that we're receiving each year.
Hell yeah.
And so I wanted to just lay that part of it for folks, because I'm like, yeah, Ireland truly is this healing place.
Yeah. And one of the other things that we are receiving as a result of the Ireland experience is that there's this growing group of artists who experience this workshop and collectivize together, because as anyone who's aware of how the workshop works knows, that part of what we do inside of the space of the workshop is we build a world together, and then we all write inside of that world. And that world is made in relationship to place, to where we are, to what people are receiving from the environment, but it's also made in relationship to each person in the room and what they're bringing. And so now we have, we have 3 years worth of alums, and we have one alum who came back as an artist in residence, which is Dwight Dunstan. And when Dwight returned, Dwight came in this particular role. And Dwight, I'm wondering if you could just give our listeners a little bit of a sense of what it was that you came back to do. And then we're going to move into our interview portion.
Yay.
Yes. In 2024, I was a participant in the workshop and got to be, facilitated by this brilliant sister duo team, and got to see Kate's connections and relationships with the people there and the place come to life, and got to dine on Max's incredible creations. I didn't get the first round of eggs, but I had the best egg salad of my life. And got to work on some writing. A lot of my writing has been poetry and lyrics, and there's a kind of visioning and speculativeness that comes through those, but really getting to do some short stories, a more longer form, and be around so many brilliant artists. It was incredible. It was moving. I always tell people, they were writing a world, we're building a world through the writing, but there's world building happening, between people, and the whole experience felt world building. Yeah. So at the end of 2024, one of the things I offered was I made this song. I made this sort of, just a beat and a song, and we shared it. Yes, we shared it. On the last night, there's a opportunity to share what you've been working on, and that was my share offering. And
it was like a ritualistic, like, opening for the entire group. It wasn't just like you performed a song, just so everyone knows.
Yeah, okay. It was right. And there was a whole
wild
portal. The portal had been open the whole time, but when it came time for 2025, and I was really thinking about going back and contributing and being a part, not just, not as a participant, but really thinking about some of the experiences I had and the gifts I bring. All of you as a teaching team just bring so many gifts. And I've been really invested and curious about how music also can play a role in just the worlds that we're trying to build, the world that we're moving towards, but also when people are in a collective experience, like what's the soundtrack to that collective experience? And it's something that I have never quite done in that way. You know, I've made albums, I've helped produce albums, but to really think about dropping into a multi-day experience and trying to capture the poetry of each and every day, or try to capture the poetry of specific moments through sound. I had never done it, but I had intuited that it was possible. And being around you all, world building, I was like, I know there's something that I can try here. And so, yeah, my role was to collect sounds or ask other people to collect sounds, you know, honoring the moment and really supporting people to be present for the experience. But like, yeah, if you hear something or if something comes through, like record a little bit and send it to me. And I think, you know, multiple people here sent stuff to me, or other folks would start to be like, hey, did you hear this sound? Or like, I have this thing, and people would send me sounds and things they've captured, the wind blowing past, you know, over the water, or the sounds of tour guides, you know, on specific parts. And I would capture them and then begin to just build songs around the sounds of the workshop as a way to try and capture the moments. We all write here and or think about art here in a specific way, and the poetics, you know, poetry is always trying to get us as close as we can without actually being the thing. That's how I at least view poetry. So I just wanted to make poetic sounds to capture what was happening, both to give back to the people so that they can take it with them, but to also, share beyond and try and get close as close as I could to the world building, to complement the world building that was happening. So.
Yeah. We will add the link so that you can hear the entire soundscape that emerged, which is so beautiful. But maybe we can just play a little bit of A Feeling Is on Me now for our listeners.
I am new to this, my skill, if it can be called such, as yet much flawed. But I find joy, not in the purity or form of completed verse, but in the release of feelings, thoughts, and ideas captured in words. And yet, therein lies my difficulty, for with what words will I pen this? Often when I think of you, it's in question form. Who were you? As a child, a girl, teenager, a fully mature woman. I knew you as a mother, but there was life before that of which only you can speak. So when I write, it is with humility, capturing only the moments we shared, and not an attempt to say who or what you were before you became my mother. But in the release of feelings,
A feeling is on me. A feeling is on me. A feeling is on me. And I can't get it all.
Beautiful. I just love that song.
So good. Well, I would like to jump us into our first question. Now that we're in the cauldron together. Okay, this first question is for Kate. Kate, you are the magician mastermind, I think of, the magic one behind this event. You bring together so many threads when you're curating these spaces: historical knowledge, deep relationship with people in the country, a real breadth of awareness of the current political context. So, like, I feel like you're constantly giving us new windows into how to understand what's happening without sort of like magical thinking, the way that most Americans like to think very magically about Ireland. And I feel like you do a good job of kind of correcting that in us. And you bring all of that to create a very specific type of experience for both for us, but also for the writers. When the retreats are over, I'm wondering if you can talk about what are some of the things that you think the cauldron has made. Like from your vantage point, what is it that we're making?
I think the first thing that stands out in my mind that I think is maybe the most meaningful to me is that we see a lot of people that come as writers to the workshop. I would say the vast majority of them are not Irish American and don't have any kind of ancestral ties to the country. And I think that through the process of getting to know the place and the people that come to do the presentations and the work that happens when we're together, I see people from other places kind of have this connection to their own ancestral homelands through the land and the people in Ireland. And it feels like that, this is a place that they've never been to before, knew it was beautiful and the people were supposed to be friendly, but maybe thought in similar ways to how Adrienne described her first experience coming to Ireland. But to be able to see people who don't have kind of the same deep connections that I do, recognize the place through their own experiences and families, I think is really beautiful to me. And if that were like the only thing that came out of the workshops, that would, still be incredibly meaningful and important to me. So
yeah,
there is another thing that happens, that is linked to that. I'm not sure if you remember, but when we had our closing ceremony, you probably do remember, we had our closing ceremony at last year's retreat, which our friend Lucy O'Hagan put on. And they were talking about having just come from this really intense week in Donegal of building Sweat House, which is something that is the Irish have an ancestral tradition of sweats in these, stone huts, but it's something that, most of them have fallen into disrepair, and it's something that, isn't really still necessarily part of ancestral practices in Ireland. And it was something Lucy had just come down from building one from the ground up with a community of hers near where she lives in Donegal. And she actually remembered when she was with us that she got the idea to do research on Irish sweat houses because she had heard about them but didn't really know that much about the background at the previous year's retreat from a writer named Adela, who was with us, who was from Puerto Rico and had been in conversation with Lucy and Moncon about her own people's tradition of sweat lodges in Puerto Rico. And that was what planted the seed in Lucy's mind. So to then fast forward a year from there and to have even just the timing of it, having Lucy come down directly and find herself in this space with this new cohort of people and remembering that connection. That was beautiful.
Wow.
I think it's also worth mentioning, and these are, not necessarily in any particular order, and I think we've touched on it a little bit in within this hour of talking, that the idea of Ireland as a respite from the fascism of the United States. I think that is something, it's not something that is created, necessarily in our coven, but it is something that, provides a backdrop for the spells that we cast when we're together. So I just wanted to mention that, perhaps if I were to pinpoint, an idea or a feeling, it would be like to be able to bring together a community of people, many of whom have more direct experience with political violence, to an environment where they can feel safe, especially in an environment that, while Ireland is becoming more and more multicultural and diverse every day, is still a majority white country, to a country that has a history of colonization and, as a result has solidarity with all of these, countries like Palestine, to be able to come to a place like that and breathe easier or be less afraid, even just for a week, and to be able to see a country that maybe is a little bit closer to being like a little bit closer to manifesting some of the ideals that, we hope will soon manifest in the United States.
Yeah. Thank you. It's really beautiful to hear this from you. I'm thinking about the look that kind of comes over the writers' faces as the week goes on, as the workshop goes on. it's, I've always tried to describe this like this inch of dignity, or this softening between the brow, a slightly wider eye, a deeper breath, and the gift of that for a writer, the gift to have just a bit more breath and a bit more safety and a bit more spaciousness and a bit more care as a writer, as a creator. It feels like so precious, and the conditions that you're such a visionary, Kate. I think I don't, there's people like this in the world, and I'm glad you and Max found each other, because I think you both are like this in your different realms, but you're just visionary. You're able to, everyone you meet, you can imagine them in this world that you're weaving. You're just like, oh yeah, you could be one of the teachers. And you approach everyone as a teacher. And anyway, it just is such a beautiful cauldron. And Dwight, we wanted to come to you next, because this piece around the soundscape, like what you did, you were an amazing participant, of course, because you're brilliant, and you were already doing that work of poetic listening, listening for the poetry, listening for the connections, listening for the medicine, right? Each year we're asking people to write the next world. And for the past couple of years, it's really been like, what could we imagine as a world beyond genocide, a world that could resonate back to now with some medicine for us? And that first year, you really heard that medicine. It was eyebright, which is a plant that is found in Ireland, but became one of the sort of metaphors of the medicine that we all need. And then last year, you created this soundscape by all of us grabbing sounds, you grabbing sounds, and then placing them into a relationship with each other that felt, I've never quite felt anything like it. Like I can go back anytime and listen to that, and it's all there somehow, like so much happened, but it all feels present in there. So we wanted to ask you how being a part of the workshop has influenced your approach to soundscaping. If you've brought that practice back, if it's like, if it's something, that you're going to start doing or bringing into more places, because it feels so exciting. And then what else, if there was anything else that you want to point to or name to, was guiding your own creative process while you were there? Because I just want people to picture Dwight is over in the corner with like headphones half on, half off, with the computer and listening, and then, sort of giving the Pisces male thought process, and then coming back out. And, like it was just, I want to hear what was happening inside the brain of the Duns.
She's outing you as a Pisces man.
Yeah.
I mean, someone had to do it.
And I feel embarrassed, because there were sometimes I was over in the corner and y'all could hear the beats coming out, and you're just like, shh, you got, like, and I was like, right,
I was like, we are doing the workshop
right.
still. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
My bad. Yeah. What about the workshop, or just, what y'all have put together? It's hard to describe once again, but there's a way that when I arrived and just began to participate on the first year and eat the food and see how things were just curated, and the thoughtfulness, and then all of these magic moments would just happen. Too many to count, but yes, the Coven and Kate's just the magic Kate, just like stuff would just find their ways to our workshop. I was just moved by the presence. Like when we really were present to one another, to the experience, it just felt like life, God, spirit, love, the universe just kept blessing us all throughout. And as an artist, as a, theater maker and musician, like I know something about, like, you hear sometimes people talk about, like, yeah, you got to make the space for the muse to come visit you, or you have to like carve out the time and listen, and you just got to like kind of tend to the craft. But there was just something about being together for those days and just dropping in. Like it was just like the muse just comes, like you see God, spirit, love, divineness, like at every corner. We look up in the sky and we see a cloud that looks like something that somebody had just described. It's just like all of these beautiful moments. And so I really, when I came back in 2025, really I I had to believe. There's something about imagination and creativity that I'm more and more finding that it's so important just to not let fear or despair seep too much in, because they're creativity killers. They just they pop the bubble of imagination in a particular kind of way, or they turn it, imagination goes towards catastrophe and catastrophe only, and I think there's something to be said about acknowledging and the realities and what is currently happening, and to let our hearts break around that witnessing, that has a place. I know grief has a place. And there's this other way of, and we can't stop being creative or imaginative, even as tears roll down our eyes, even as our hearts break, even as we're holding each other's hand and just saying, I don't know what's next, right? Like there's somebody in that circle who doesn't, my teacher Arwana says, who that we should be really in touch with the true next move, right? The true next step. So we don't know all of what's coming, but there's a next step that's presenting itself. And so I really learned that in 2024 of like every step that it felt like we were following, and from your facilitation, from Kate, the speakers that are coming in, from the like Max, you're chefing back there, and we're like sometimes figuring things out. Like I just felt everybody present and really listening for the true next move. And so coming back, I was just like, I just learned to really listen. I did not know what kind of sounds or how they're going to bleed together or, come together. But I was just like, oh, this feels like an important sound to capture. Oh, somebody felt like, oh, Dwight, this is an important sound to capture. I don't know what to do with this, but I'm giving it to you. People would start to just follow intuition and the true whatever that next true step was, and they would send it to me. And then as I was making beats, I wouldn't get too attached, because sometimes, and Autumn can tell you with, Nehemiah, sometimes I get really in when I'm making these worlds for the album. But, I really was just like, I'm not going to fret too much. I'm going to just listen and say yes. And then I'm going to let things go. There's like 10 other songs that didn't get made, from some of those sounds, but the 8.
Yeah. No, but I
We're
think
like, there's more.
I know. I was like, you need to go make those. But I think there's something you're speaking about right now that I just want to highlight for people to hear, because I both am like, I really want people to just understand what a beautiful thing happens in Ireland, but I also want people to be like, and you should also be making beautiful things wherever you are like this. And there's something about this wild collaborativeness, right? Like we have the historian, we have activists, we have organizers, we have musicians, we have beat makers, we have the chef, we have people who love the land, we have local teachers, we have indigenous worldways. But it's the collaboration, we have the president's children, like it's all happening, right? And it's little pieces, but everyone has a particular part to bring, which is why I think the soundscaping is so crucial, because in the same way, we write so much, we leave a lot of it on the editing floor, and it's only like, what is the place that is the collaboration between what I can express and what you can receive. And then the collaboration between what a group of us can express and receive and feel, and how much laughter, and like who goes off to the pub and has a drink afterwards. And can you capture the sound of that bubbling energy? And can you capture the little tears that happen and the little sound of what happens when everyone goes to the water? And anyway, it's just what you're talking about. It's like, it's the collaboration. It's not just Autumn and I teaching at, it really is an invitation to create with.
Yeah. And the last thing, I mean, exactly that. And, I spend a lot of time thinking about groups. I spend a lot of time thinking about groups, and groups coming together, and groups being together with all of our tragedies and triumphs, everything that we're carrying to that moment. And, as someone who does a lot of conflict work, it just happens when our lives bump up against one another. And that spark, is actually like, there's just an energy around there. So as you'll listen to the sounds, some stuff might not all, it's not all clean, or it's not all, some things I hope, there's just like beauty in the dissonance, and that's just like where new life comes together. So I think the collaboration, like true collaboration to me, is not about like everybody moving in at the same step, the same formation, but it's like, how do all our gifts mix around and like make something that could have never, ever been, because it's only in all of us coming together, all these sounds coming together, that you have this song. So there's footsteps and there's a voice and there's the beat I, sampled. And then there's one other little thing that I don't even know where I pulled from, but and there's your song. And I think that's like collaboration. It's just like all of these things together to make something that has never been and never will be again, because it's just about that moment.
Yeah.
It's so cool how much how closely the process and the outcome are tied in that work. Like, it's not just, making some sketches and expressing yourself, but it's also not like purely, I'm going to make a polished album and release it and finish it. It's like the process and the product are like equally important.
Yeah. It's a good segue, actually.
It's a great segue, because Max, we were about to turn to you, my friend.
The egg king.
Max, you hold, in so many ways, you're holding like the centerpiece of the group experience that the writers are having, which is when we gather around the food. And in different years, you've held that in different ways. I mean, you're always the person who's like holding down the food coordination piece, and like, how are we sourcing? Who is chefing? At least one of the years, you were the main person chefing the entire week, which I think we then decided was not fair to you. But it was amazing for us, but it was maybe not the most fair to you.
We were taking advantage of you, but it was good.
Fun. But it was great for us. But and obviously we've brought in Rose as our guest chef in more than 1 year, and coordinated, incredible meal experiences at other restaurants as a part of the process.
And last year, Rose brought her family.
Oh my God, Rose's
treat.
new baby. And we will link to Rose and to more information about Rose in the show notes.
Gay baby, gay family.
Gay family, gay baby. But Max, I'm wondering, I know you've thought a lot about this. So I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about, the role of food in cultural transformation and in fostering communal creativity, or just a sense of commons amongst people.
I think what food allows us to do is, I love how it plays like a supporting role to all these other things, and it allows for everything else to happen around it. Like, to me, the place that I'm really comfortable is when the food I'm making is like in service of something else, and it just lets that happen. And whether that is like, a good conversation or a gathering, or, even like, a holiday or something like that, there's all these different ways that happens. And I think, that's what I love about food, and that's where I like to be, is like using it to let those other things happen. I enjoy cooking a lot too, so it's like, it's fun, and it's something that I've been, working on, practicing and doing my whole life. But I was always like a little uncomfortable with the idea that the food itself is like, becomes the star of the show in a way that like takes away from the other things that are supposed to be happening. And there's like this pretty dramatic controversy happening right now with the quote unquote best restaurant in the world, that where the chef, perhaps unsurprisingly, was revealed to be like an incredibly toxic and abusive person. And it's hard for me to like, I know, right? It's hard for me to not connect the idea that like, when you take the food itself so seriously as like, that's the only thing that actually matters, and that lets that ego just roam like completely unchecked where it's not really in service to anything, that actually is like, dangerous, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah, I would like to respond. First of all, I love the idea that you're talking about this idea of the food as perhaps the scaffolding that the other elements of the retreat are built on. But I do have to say, as somebody who is there and eats the food, that and perhaps this is because I have a writing coach now, but I have to say that the food actually, like, it does that, yes, but it is also so incredibly delicious and nourishing. It's like better described, like it really is like a character in the story that we're creating when we're together, and so, as much as the setting or the backdrop is Ireland, and Ireland is like a character in our story, so is the food. So I would say that I agree with everything you're saying, but don't sell yourself short on the role that the actual flavor of the food plays in the time that we're together.
Thank you.
I think that's so important. I also want to say that, like, Max, you and Rose as the chef energies, I think it's really helpful for people to get to witness y'all, because you bring, you're both like exacting and precise about what you're trying to do, and kind of curious and kind of wild. Like, you both just have like I don't know, some wild things going on. We don't have this, we're doing that. The kitchen is this big, we're going to run into a basement. Like, there's just this wild energy. And then you give us something delicious, but you're both so humble about it. I don't know. I just threw together a little bit of like a ton, and then it's like and then people are like, this is the best thing I ever tasted. And you make it sound simple,
So like you said, I cooked for a couple of years, and then we've had Rose, a friend, and a really incredibly talented chef, cook for a few of the years. And I think we see eye to eye on a lot of these important things, and her career is actually kind of similar, in the broad outlines, where she, started cooking and came up and pursued, really high-end fine dining Michelin star cuisine, and then realized that the lifestyle was toxic and, got completely burnt out on that type of work and that type of relationship with food, and then had to kind of rebuild it in a way that was like meaningful and like worked for her and the kind of life that she wanted to lead. And so, you don't necessarily know all that, but you can kind of feel that when you watch her cook and when you taste her food, because it's, like you said, it's technically precise and really thoughtful, but it can feel very personal and very intuitive at the same time. And Dwight, when you were talking about that egg salad earlier, it made me like realize how appreciative I am for this opportunity to do this kind of cooking. Because in my normal work, like what I'm doing a lot of times is like weighing everything by the gram and writing these recipes that if there's like one little thing that is just a little bit off, like things go off the rails and, a batch is ruined and all this stuff. And it's like, I like that kind of work, and it's important, but then also to just be able to cook and not follow a recipe and just be like, what's out there and what's going to be good. And, I got to have dinner ready at 7:30. And that's pretty much it. It's like a totally different kind of way of making stuff, creating also,
Big family style.
Cool.
Right. There's like it's deep, because there's an element of improvisation that is threaded throughout all aspects of this experience, from the food to the music to the writing to the world building to the magic of being in Ireland. It's like that element of like room to improvise and have something spontaneous and magic happen is a huge part of the experience.
Yeah.
So I want to say, for our listeners who are like hearing about this and are like, holy shit, that sounds like the best thing ever in the world. We are getting ready for Writing the Next World 2026. Applications are basically due immediately right now.
Yeah.
And at the point that this episode will come out, it will probably be about 24 to 48 hours out from the application deadline. But it's a short application. It doesn't take a lot of time to fill out. So just want to strongly encourage people to consider applying this year if this sounds like the kind of space that would be amazing for you. And just wanted to thank all of you as we're about to transition into top culture. So for our listeners who are not on Patreon, that's where you have to go to hear what we're about to talk about. But in the meantime, as we make that transition, I just want to say a huge thanks to Max and Kate and Dwight for coming on the show and sharing about the magic of Ireland with us.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
What a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to our show. We're on Instagram at End of the World PC.
You can make a sustaining donation to our show by visiting our page at patreon.com/endoftheworldshow. If you become a patron, you get our show inside a show, Top Culture, every Monday after we release a new Friday episode.
Another incredible thing you can do to help our show sustain itself is to write us a review on Apple Podcasts if you are an iPhone person. This helps people looking for good new content to find us. Thank you.
How to Survive the End of the World is produced and edited by the very sweet Zach Rosen. Transcripts are in our show notes and on our website at endoftheworldshow.org. And special thanks to Samira Abdurrahman for all the coordination behind the scenes.
Music for today's show comes from Tunde Alaniran and Sterling Duns.
We love y'all.
I know.
Terrible.